Welcome everybody to the Athletex Disrupt 2023 video series. This is the panel discussing fitness transformed, embracing the AI revolution within our industry. And my name is Eric Malzone. I am your host and moderator. I am joined by three brilliant minds within the fitness industry, and I'm really excited to get into these topics. I don't know what the rest of the panels are discussing in particular, but I can't imagine anything more important than artificial intelligence at this point in time. I mean, it's coming on really hot, it's coming on really hard, and we're just struggling to keep up with it at this point. So can't wait to get your guys' insights. I think the best way to start, we're just going to do a quick round robin. Everyone can introduce themselves, your title, your company, and then we'll get right into the topic. So my screen, let's go ahead and start with you, Stephen. Quick intro, and we'll move on.
Sure. I'm Stephen Webster. Thanks for having me on the panel. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Ascensi. So just super quickly, as context for the rest of the panel, connected health and fitness companies choose Ascensi to create digital experiences that are super personalized. And we do that with AI for motion capture, movement recognition, and coaching intelligence. So super excited to get into it.
Awesome. And Mo, how about you?
Yeah, Eric, so glad to be on this panel again. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm the founder and CEO of Sweatworks. My name is Mohammed Iqbal. I've actually had a chance to work with Stephen for many years and really excited to talk about this product. Sweatworks is a product development agency. We've been around for almost 12 years now and purely focused on the health, fitness, and wellness space.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. Last but not least, Skip.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Skip Cronin. I'm the CEO of Elite Form, and we started in the sports performance space. So we've developed 3D motion capture algorithms to measure performance in a weight room and then predict how that translates out into sports performance as a whole. And it just builds from there. So excited about this one.
Right on. Well, thank you guys. Let's get into it. So question number one is, how has AI already started to impact the fitness and health industries? And can you share specific examples of successful AI implementations into your companies and businesses? Let's kick it off. Steve, why don't you address that one first, and then we'll move around.
Sure. I love that quote about bankruptcy. I think it's kind of the same as digital disruption, right? It's like slowly but suddenly. You kind of touched on that. Like 2023 has been a turning point and a tipping point for us in terms of customers that are deploying our AI solutions. I'll give you 4 examples quickly. The first is in what we call industrial athletes. 80% of the global workforce and the American workforce is deskless and a physically demanding job. And we deserve to treat the American worker like an athlete. And so we're working with companies like Amp Recover to bring AI for everything from job screening and movement assessments to return to work protocols. Spatial computing is taking off this year. Again, a technology that's going to be tomorrow for 10 years is really kind of finding its legs. So we're working with companies like Fitar and Lightsport and VR and AR. How do you bring your full body into VR, not just your upper half, the half-atar? I'm very excited about the opportunity for legacy brands as we move into the mass market, brands that are not digitally first, but have massive install bases. I'll bet, Eric, you could probably trip over some power blocks in that room that you're in right now, or you have a Vertimax in your garage. Those are customers we're working with to bring their products into digital future. And of course, connected fitness. So we've got companies like Bouts working with us, boxing bags with a brain. If you've been paying attention, you've seen a company called Alter. We're bringing a new screen where it's personalization with genetics, biometrics, and biomechanics. We're super excited to work with them. And I'll give you a scoop. Chris Hemsworth's Center is now working with Ascensi as well. I know you interviewed Andrew recently. And so as they start thinking about how do you marry the world of physical product and digital content, Ascensi gets to be the connective tissue that makes that happen. So yeah, it's lots of companies are now deploying AI to the general consumer, but the consumer doesn't know it's AI. It's just an awesome experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, right? Is the consumer doesn't know that it's AI. I think that's probably going to come up a few times within this conversation. So yeah, thanks for those insights, Stephen. Mo, what about you?
Yeah, look, we've been implementing AI for a few years now in a couple of ways. Stephen mentioned a lot of examples based around vision, so I don't want to touch on specific vision-based examples because he's already covered that, and there's some that we're working on with him that he did not mention. A lot of our focus has really been around personalization. So we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I think the launch of Chat GPT, or rather the public version of that last fall, really helped accelerate AI awareness with the broader public. So I think the comfort level, the understanding of technology, the fact that you can go try it, making it more accessible has made the public more comfortable with that. Most of our implementations around AI has been leveraging big data for personalization. So if you think about all the data points which we now have access to from wearables, we now have an Aura ring. I think you have an Aura as well, Eric. As one point, looking at how we treat top of the funnel conversion to what we're servicing in cart, to how then that relates to engagement and retention. Personalization is really the way to go. And by implementing AI and big data, we've been able to really increase that success factor, not only of whatever the reason is that that person came into the program, but how they could continue to stay in that program. Some brands that we worked with over the last couple of years have included brands like Strava, Beachbody, Equinox, Lifetime Fitness, and several in the connector space, including Mixed Fitness, City Row, and others. But it's all really kind of been around creating that personal journey for them.
Yeah, personalization, big buzzword 2023 for sure. Skip, how about you?
Well, from an elite form perspective, we started with in a very narrow AI in the sense of a particular performance metric. And so, we started at a place where we're looking at elite athletes, and as opposed to gathering data in a lab and having a very narrow data set, we're able to expand on that as we gained clients and actually use big data and AI in such a way where you begin to see improvement metrics that then get more granular, and you see higher performance on, say, a football Saturday. And so for us, we're a little bit different in this conversation in that we're looking at how do you take an Alabama football and keep them on top? How do you take a University of Michigan and actually help them find their way into the college football Final Four? And for us, then it becomes taking that very narrow band and then widen it out to the point where we can see a consumer market start to consume those key pieces that are actually going to translate to wellness. And you think of wellness almost as a performance metric in that sense, as opposed to winning on Saturday.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me see when you see, especially in our sphere, like technologies, how they start to come. They usually start at 1% on either end, like the high performers, right? The DoD, the pro athletes, and then the other 1% on the other end, which are the sick and people who need a lot of special attention to get them healthy. And then it kind of starts to merge towards the middle over time. And the perspectives we have on this panel are really diverse. I really like what we have here. So let's go ahead and move on to the second question. And it is, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that AI presents in terms of personalizing fitness and wellness experiences for individuals? And Mo, you just touched on that. So why don't we go ahead and start with you on that question?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is, as an organization, depending on how large of an organization you're working with, there is steps to get the organization culturally to get adapted to AI. So there's 5 stages of AI that we typically walk them through. The first is awareness, knowing the fact that it's there. The second is putting it into active use. The third is using operational benefits of it, so using it for content, but really using it in a multidisciplinary fashion across the organization. Then is going into what's called a systemic, or creating our POCs, and then it's transforming the product. That's a journey. And that journey doesn't happen overnight. It happens really over years. And in 2023, and we were talking about this over the last couple of comments, I think we're really in this systemic stage, or typically 4 out of 5, where we've built these POCs, we've built these applications, and it's not giving the exact return that we want, but it's showing some value. The key thing here is to push forward, because it's the learnings that are critical. And before you can get to that transformational stage, you've got to go through this POC stage first before you could fully reap the benefits of it. So I think, to me, that's really the challenge, is knowing that AI is a process, that it doesn't just happen over a 3-month implementation, but it's really a process that probably takes a good 12 to 24 months before you could fully realize and recognize the value of it.
Excellent. Skip, what's your insights on that question?
Well, it's interesting because I tend to think my first question always like, what's the desired outcome? And so then do we have the capability to gather enough data to actually begin to process it properly? And so one of the things we'll talk about within Elite Form is there's an issue of collection devices. So there's a desired outcome, there's the data we need to understand that outcome, but then from a hardware perspective, how are we able to gather the particular data that we need in order to actually do the proper analysis to even be able to get there? And so, it's one of those things that both concerns me and excites me at the same time. So, hardware is an ever-changing world in and of itself. But hardware, just like the five senses, right, can have blind spots. And so an example I often use is when we're talking about strength training, is there are three phases of a lift that anyone will do. There's the eccentric phase, the isometric phase, and the concentric phase. Well, in that isometric phase, nothing visually moves. So if you're in a world where you're using a 3D motion capture camera, that's not the collection device for that moment. And so, there's an immediate miss, but there's opportunity there because now we start to talk about how can we merge data collection together to gather more data to then begin to process that in a more informed way. And from a performance perspective and pushing into the consumer market, we're finally starting to see some of those dominoes fall together. And I think that's going to be pretty engaging as far as next steps.
Yeah, you brought up one thing that I resonate with me too. It's like a combination of concern and excitement. I think that really kind of encapsulates how we all feel about AI at this point, right? It's not boring. Stephen, how would you touch on that topic?
Well, first of all, I'm an early stage founder, so concern and excitement defines my life. I think the challenges are hype. I think the challenges with AI are the same as Web3, as crypto, as blockchain, as any other kind of shiny object technology. We'll go through a big period of solutions looking for problems. We'll go through a period of solutions being solved with AI that didn't need AI to solve them. How many times I saw solutions on the blockchain, I'm like, you could have used the database. You didn't need to use blockchain for that. So, and I think the other thing, not to contradict anything that's been said already, because I agree with what Mo and Skip have both said, but you will also see lots of if I just throw loads of data into some model, something magical will spit out, and that's just not the case. You need to work back from the score, kind of what you said, Skip, right? It's what's the outcome? What's the desired outcome? So, Eric, I'm more thinking about the opportunities than I think about the challenges. And I think about the opportunity for AI is it or is it not in service of the broader mission, which is how do we elevate the experience that consumers are getting in health and fitness, whether it's in person or whether it's at home, and how do we take it to digital scale? Does AI support us to do that? And I agree with exactly what Mo said. I think it's really about personalization. And you said it's a 2023 buzzword. It's a 1993 buzzword. I mean, one-to-one marketing and Peppers and Rogers and e-commerce was all about how can Mo and I have a different Amazon homepage? How can Skip and I have a different Netflix screen when we launch the app that puts us at the center? But I think for me, and maybe we'll touch on this more, personalization in health and fitness is less about the content and more about how the content is consumed. And I think quite unique to health and fitness is the content's best consumed with a guide. The epitome of personalized fitness is a personal trainer. It's someone or a coach. It's someone that takes you through the content, observing you and deciding the pace at which you should go through that content, or should we go back and do that chapter again and review it? And so that's what I think about is the big opportunity for AI is how can I personalize and differentiate the way content is consumed, rather than just make it a discovery engine. It's like, hey, I've ingested all of this data and here's the YouTube video I want you to watch next. It's probably necessary, but not sufficient.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other follow-up comments or thoughts on this one from anybody?
Well, something that really resonated with me in Stephen's comments was the idea of that personal trainer and a guide. Even with Chat GPT, there's a human element to how they develop. Whereas they were looking at outcomes in their process, they actually had like a group of people who would then review and make sure that everything was on track. And so I think something that casually gets missed when we talk about AI is we do think of Skynet, like, and we think of just almost automatons, right? But there's always been, even with, as we move into general AI, there's always been an element where things are being reviewed by human hand to keep it on track. And I think fitness and personalization is going to be a subset of that as we go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
the one thing I'll add, because Skip has mentioned two terms, just for the broader audience here, he's mentioned narrow and general AI. So if you don't know what those are, narrow AI is typically what is Siri, Alexa, facial recognition, and that's what most people have been using for a while. But general AI is like Tesla Autopilot. It's really where the decisions are on par with human capabilities, where you really can't tell the difference between whether it's a human or whether it is a machine, kind of, giving you that feedback. But Skip, you use that term, and originally I did not know what that was. I just want to educate the audience on that.
That's a good point.
Well, I think what Stephen's going to want us to do is take like a personal trainer through a Turing test, and we can actually then determine, right? Like,
I actually don't.
Are they human or are they not?
No, I actually don't. I'm glad you brought that up because, I'm old enough to remember when AI was expert systems and not like training models and neural networks and, convolution. And so I actually think in the world of sport and fitness and health, the AI of expert systems still hasn't had its day yet. And how do we take the knowledge and expertise of actual experts and give machines the senses that they need, the vision, for instance, that they need to observe an individual and then provide the coaching that would have been provided were the expert there in the way the expert would have done it. I'm not ready, Skip, to kind of allow a machine to coach a better Michigan footballer than Jim Harbaugh. I want Jim around for a little bit longer. Michigan. Yeah.
But I want to add, again, back to Skip, the term Turing test, just people, again, think that AI is something that is, like I said, really hot in 2023. The Turing test came up in 1950. That is when the term was defined. And that's really important to know. So the concept of AI has been around for decades, but I think the application of it, and I think the concept's been there, the technology and the applications have now caught up to that. And this is why we're in such an important period.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I'm just glad you brought up that definition. Sometimes we get in these panels and we start talking about things and we forget that we need to actually define things to have a thorough conversation. So I was telling you guys earlier, I watched a documentary last night, the AI. It was, I'll bring it up later, but they called it Gollum, right? Generalized large language models, and that's really what's new. It's funny. It's really funny, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like that's a definition I didn't know of until recently. I'm guessing most people who are watching this maybe don't know the difference. They're just used to what we've seen in little bits and pieces of AI, but nothing pulled together cohesively like that. So I'm glad you brought it up. Steve, you had another comment.
Yeah, just a quick subtlety as well. We have a tendency as humans to anthropomorphize everything, right? We always want technology to kind of feel like a human, and we make that mistake all the time with AI. It's like as if it's the point of AI is that it's our interface. We speak to virtual instead of real. Whereas I actually think about AI in my world as how can it give a machine the sense. There's lots of roles for AI there that we enhance the ability for the machine to back and forth with us without fooling ourselves that it's not a machine in the background.
Yeah. Excellent points, you guys. Let's move on to the next question. We're going to start with Skip with you on this one. What are you most excited and enthusiastic about when it comes to AI's potential to transform the fitness and health industries? Part A. Part B, how close are we to those possibilities becoming reality? Skip, what say you?
I go back to that subject of outcomes. And for me, one of the things that most intrigues me is how we can develop an industry where we remain sticky for individuals across their lifespans in terms of health and fitness. And so it touches a little bit on a question that we decided not to dive too deeply into in terms of how it impacts the mental game, if you will. But from where we started with the LEAP forum, and I'm sure I have some cognitive bias toward this, we have always been looking at performance outcomes and then how to translate that into general wellness. And some of those metrics transfer pretty easily. But what doesn't transfer as easily is the motivations people have to continue to maintain their fitness across a longer period of time. And so We all know that there's good science and great anecdotal evidence in terms of how important it is to maintain a healthy lifestyle long term. But we also see in terms of, call it, daily business, that one of the things that humans really tend to fail at is staying consistent over a longer period of time. Like fad diets, fad workouts, all seem to play a role in terms of how humans handle their fitness. And I think there's going to become a point where we start to see some merger between how we're collecting various bits of data, not just in terms of here's my resting heart rate on a given day, here's particular performance metrics, but how we can use those things to be motivational as well as objectively measurable throughout a longer range period of time. So when that college athlete stops becoming an athlete, how do they maintain their wellness? And in fact, it'll become, because you were a given kind of athlete, what does the data tell us in terms of the best way to remove all those physical imbalances that you have and then bring yourself back up to a healthy norm in terms of living what would be a more average lifestyle? So that's a lot. And there's a lot of steps to be taken, right, until we can get there. But you can see the pieces in mosaic. And I think it's just a matter of time until people like Mo and Steve bring them all together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And to quote a friend of probably all ours on the panel, Jim Kroll, he always states that fitness is very emotional depending on the individual. Why I train 10 years ago is very different. Why I train today is probably different than why I'll train tomorrow. Right. Today maybe I just need to get out. It's a beautiful day. Tomorrow might be I'm so stressed out. I just need to get some movement in my life. Like it's just an emotional individual thing. And I think you're tapping onto something that's very powerful, Skip, is like, well, how do we get into that to make it a more consistent, malleable piece of someone's life? I think it's a really excellent point. Stephen, how about you? What's your take on this question?
No, I'm glad you asked me next because I wanted to sort of add on to that. I think, if I think about why am I in this industry, it's a couple of things. Individually, I like that definition of Olympism. I am not an Olympian, but I like that definition of Olympism, to know the joy and the reward from effort. And I think the more people that have that joy and that feeling of like I tried to do something really hard and I accomplished it, and as a coach, I saw that transformation in so many students where they would come to university and train with me for 4 years, and I meet them years later, and they valued the time they spent in the dojo with me more than they valued the law degree that they had, because they were in a team and they competed and they got a black belt. And so I'm very motivated by how do we scale that. And and what I get excited about is, like, I always wanted to train with my idols. Like I had Bruce Lee posters in my garage next to my punch bag. I had posters of Gretzky. I would play soccer, football. It's like, you be Maradona and I'll be Pelé. We would literally imagine we were our idols. We'd imagine being coached by them, and you would imitate them, the way they played. And so that's the future I still want to live in. And when I think about what we're trying to do with our customers at Ascensi, I can put the voice of my idols or your idols in your ear. We have a technology called Ascensi Voice that's a partnership that I can literally turn Chris Hemsworth into text-to-speech and make him speak to you. With our XR technologies, we can put these people in your living room, like in front of you. And I've seen some stuff on AI recently where that text-to-speech can make their lips move the way they would move if they were saying the words they're saying. And so that's super exciting for me, that I can become a protagonist in my own story alongside my heroes and my idols, my football team, whatever. I just think about, like, how will that impact participation? How will that impact engagement and enjoyment and retention? It's mind-blowing to me.
Awesome. Mo, what about you? Excited and enthusiastic. What comes to mind?
I've always believed, and Eric, you and I have spoken about this many times, that technology is a great way to help provide more access to the people that don't have it or can have it for whatever reason. The evolution of the mobile internet and mobile computing in 2008, 2009 was a huge step in that direction. It's what ultimately led to me wanting to form the company, to a lot of technologies that we saw come out, like WhatsApp and Uber, Airbnb, and so on. This is the next revolution in technology, is AI. And ultimately, what that's going to solve is, I believe, two things. One, it's going to dramatically help improve accessibility. So to what Stephen and Skip just said, where you might have needed these expert trainers, or they might not be accessible, but you still need to get the feedback, you now have that on your phone, right? You could have Chris Hemsworth on your phone coaching you in your ear. I mean, really addressing all your senses, from a training program to the voice. I mean, pretty much like being there. That's one. And there's a lot of benefits to having that there. Second, it's going to help improve outcomes, right? Using AI, we could personalize the journey for you. So now, if you're committing on January 1st, which is still the number one New Year's resolution, is to get in better shape. It's weight loss, but it's all the other things. If you combine it all together, it is to feel better and get in better shape. We could help improve those success factors and those success outcomes leveraging AI. I think the third thing is longevity. I think AI is truly going to help people not only live longer, but live a better life while they're living longer. So it's improving health span and lifespan. And look, what people talk a lot about is the fear of jobs or losing my job. I don't believe that you're going to lose your job because of AI. And something that I've tried to communicate to the brands that we work with is that AI will not replace humans. It's going to make your humans more effective. It's going to make your humans reach more people more effectively and help them be more successful. Now, if you don't use AI, I think that's where your job might be at a risk. I think as brands, and this could apply to brands and to humans, but you need to learn to embrace the technology, not fear it, because if you don't, now you are at a risk of being obsolete. But if you do, I think the sky is the limit for where you can go.
Awesome. Awesome, guys. Amazing insights on this. And I want to I think we have time for one more question. So I want to skip to one that I think is important. And, the existential questions around AI are always there, right? I'm not going to get into like dinner party mode here where I would ask the really gritty stuff. It's not what this is for, but ethical considerations, right, for AI. So it's paramount as we develop AI to have ethical considerations and guidelines. So, what guidelines and principles do your companies follow to ensure the responsible use of AI in health and fitness domains? And I forget where I think we're back to the top. Stephen, what about you?
Yeah, when I think about ethical guidelines, I think one of the challenges we always have is just implicit or systemic bias in any system. And that's a big challenge for AI. The data sets that we're training on, do they match the populations that we're delivering to? Yeah, I don't know if I even want to bring this up, but I was at Microsoft when we had the racist chatbot, and I'm just going to leave it there. You can Google it and find it for yourself. But essentially, this was a chatbot that hallucinated what it had learned on Twitter. And it turns out Twitter's not a great place to train a bot how to have a civic public discourse. So, we really have to think about the training sets that we're using to train data. I was today reading a paper about improving basketball shots, the biomechanics of coaching a 3-point shot and a 2-point shot. And there's differences between men and women, as it turns out, in this paper, whether the industry agrees or not. But the biomechanics are different, or could be different potentially for a woman and a male. Now, if you've trained on a data set of males taking 3-point shots, and then you try to give coaching feedback to women trained on that data set, that might not be the most optimal way of training. So I get very excited quickly about generative AI, not that I can go off and create some image, but we're actually doing stuff where we're training PowerBlock and some other companies, we're training recognition of dumbbells and what weight that dumbbell is. And we're doing that not just with real video and real photography, but we're taking CAD models and we're able to do like photorealistic renders of video and images of that dumbbell being used by different people in different environments with different skin colors. So we can use AI to remove that bias in the training set by creating a more rich, diverse training set of data, artificially, if you like. So I kind of nerd out about all the boring ways of using AI and not necessarily how does it touch the consumer or touch the brand.
Excellent. Excellent. Mo, ethical considerations.
Yeah, look, I think you have to think about this. If the last 20 or 30 years have shown us is you can't necessarily lean on big tech to always do the right thing. And look, there currently is an antitrust lawsuit with Google. Ironically, Google was formed from another antitrust lawsuit from even your company with Microsoft. where they try to bundle everything in together, and coming out of that, now Google was formed. And I think that the same is true here, where you need government, you need states, you need countries to come and put some bookends around what the technology can do. And I'm not always a fan of having big government kind of come in and tell you what to do, because it could also stifle innovation as well. But at the same time, I do think that there are some regulations that are trying to keep up. So I think technology is always a couple of years ahead of where the regulations are going to be. But that's one. And I think finally, it's up to companies that are coming into the space, and where investors are coming into it as well. You study the architecture. Something like AI, you really have to understand the technology, understand how it's being implemented. Something that we try to do all the time, and Steve and I have had many conversations and implementations about this, is doing things on the edge, limiting what you store in the cloud, using data sets that do not include PII information. So there are a lot of steps that we could do before the regulation catches up with us to make sure that we're taking the right steps towards being as secure as possible.
Eric, sorry, Skip, just before we go to you, I might have agreed with Mo in the past on something he said, and I just watched a talk a few nights ago that solidified for me. I have a different point of view now, Mo, on the importance of regulation for big tech. So go and watch Brian Gurley's talk on regulation. It's called 2,851 miles, which is the distance between DC and Silicon Valley. And he shows how regulation favors the big tech incumbent and actually stymies competition. So I thought that was super interesting in the context of AI as well. And he shows many examples where the desired effect, the opposite, is actually achieved to the benefit, which is why there's so many lobbyists in big tech for regulation. And think about it: what's Zuckerberg asking for? What's Sam Altman asking for? They're both asking for regulation because it favors them.
Interesting. And before we get to you, Skip, too, just because it came to mind, AI Dilemma was the documentary I was trying to reference in my mind earlier, so people will go back to that. Skip, final thoughts on this, ethical considerations for you.
Yeah, I think Stephen and Mo brought up some really good points. This is kind of a friction point that Elite Forum lives in every day. So from a legal perspective, often there's often some federal considerations, but actually details tend to follow in state by state. And so we end up looking at what is happening within every single state. And if it happens to be a private facility, they may even layer on more concern. And so it seems like, to Mo's point, we're effectively at least 2 to 3 years ahead of the game all the time, and then end up having to have a bit of a concern in terms of, have we developed something that we have to then pull back? And so, we take more of a HIPAA style approach, even though we aren't necessarily required to, in order to kind of protect ourselves and the company as well as our users from any considerations. But our world is also such that, if you paid attention to what is happening with like NIL in terms of sports performance in colleges, there's a constant clamoring of other voices to want to understand the data, talk about the data, and really understand how does people sharing this impact me at the end of the day. And so I don't know that we'll ever actually be able to get outside of it necessarily. I think it's a point that everyone is going to be continually managing and adjusting. And if what Stephen just watched is correct, which I'm sure it is based on the rest of how our world tends to work, I think what we'll find is then smaller entities like Elite Forum are going to probably have to navigate in the cracks in terms of how they balance what's coming through in terms of legislation, right? Versus, I think, actually at the end of the day, what clients want. Because for us, the most cutting edge questions we get asked are the higher performers. And they want more granular data to equate to better information, because at the end of the day, winning becomes their jobs. So their outcome is defined as, like I've mentioned before, winning on Saturday. And they're going to be asking for data that no one in the State House is going to talk about. But the players are going to understand that data is being gathered. And more they're going to be asking questions about it. And so I certainly do not have an answer. I think the answer that I have is I understand that I always have to constantly be on top of the question. And that, to some degrees, I think the best we can do right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, you guys, Steve, Mo, Skip, this has been extremely insightful. And I wish I could sit here and ask you guys questions for hours today and have this conversation in person. You know, it's so important. It's so critical. I think we gave more than enough to at least get people thinking and asking the right questions, to your point, Skip, of like, okay, well, where do I need to be to skate to where the puck is going, right? To use the analogy that quite often comes up in my conversation. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate everyone who sat through this and listened. And, you know, obviously there's going to be ways to reach out to all these speakers and myself. And yeah, so that's a wrap for Athletitech's Disrupt 2023 video series on fitness transformed, embracing the AI revolution. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.